Strong, and well, I'll give you the introduction. This is Charlie Paxton, this is executive producer. Paul Rockman, writer. I'm Andrew, the director, and the actors you've just seen, but I can go through Judy Walters, Henry Lloyd Hughes, Asha Atkala, and Nikesh Patel, and Jemima Wells. So not quite in that order, that's the problem. So if you would switch those around accordingly, it's not in the order so I'm going to ask a couple of questions, and then we'll put it open to the floor. And I suppose the first thing is it looks tidy. How did it all come about? How did you bring this to the screen 31 years after the last Indian drama was on the British Empire dramas on TV?
Yeah, I guess I first went to India when I was about 22, and I worked out there for a few years, and I've been back several times since. On my last trip, I went out with my family, and we were in a hotel in Darjeeling, and the manager of the hotel was showing me around, and was, you know, it used to be some kind of boarding house back in the days when it was a British town. She wanted to show me all the old stuff that was still sort of stored away there, and opened a cupboard, and literally a sort of a wall of old photographs fell out. And these photographs were a kind of story of a world that has gone, and full of British people from all walks of life, sitting about, dancing and drinking, and living this sort of strange ersatz life as if they were dukes and duchesses. It wasn't so long ago, and it struck me at the time as an extraordinary thing for my generation. I mean, I think I was 14 when Children of the Crown was on, that something that was so, I almost want to say central a part of what British people felt about themselves and felt about ourselves as a nation, has been swept away, swept under the carpet. Hill stations strike me as very interesting because they were built by the British as an escape, as a kind of ersatz home, as a place to get away during the hot season. And they were also a crossroads between politics and a kind of determined frivolity. And the queen of hill stations was Shimla, or Simla as it was known then, which was the sort of the political hub of a subcontinent. But it was also a place where people just went to get away and throw themselves into this hectic social scene, where it was the one place where there were probably as many or more European women as there were European men. And I suppose somewhere that was at once like a small Surrey town stuck in the Himalayas, and also the capital of a subcontinent. It seemed to me, in that terrible telly jargon at the time, like a perfect precinct. A precinct where we could pull together something. We could pull together a story of how the empire ended. I mean, even the word summers is fake. It's the hot season or the rainy season, but it was part of, I suppose, that British attempt to impose our own culture on something else, a product of a kind of almost tragic homesickness. My wife is Indian, and I would say her grandfather was an Afrin Jalal. He was a junior clerk in the Indian Provincial Service, and so my mother-in-law's early childhood was spent moving from Delhi up to Shimla and back. And I suppose the strangeness of that Indian experience on a more domestic level of people just trying to get by, coupled with this extraordinary, rather orotund sense of kind of service and duty with which British civil servants imbued whatever it was that they were doing, seemed to me irresistible, fascinating, and romantic. Let's admit that. And I guess that was the starting point.
And you were saying earlier that this is the only non-adaptation that's...
Yeah, I mean, you know, so Paul came to me and with Simon Curtis, and what I, you know, and it's not often that somebody comes to you with this sort of fully formed, madly ambitious, you know, they came and they pitched me 50 hours of television that would start in 1932, that we would follow these characters through in this sort of massive, personal, romantic, political saga through to independence, and in so doing, describe a sort of key piece of history. and this was entirely original work. And you know, we've got an amazing, I think, an amazing television season this year. But if you look around it, you know, most of our work is adaptations, and you know, I think that's the sort of extraordinary confidence of Channel 4 in a way that they sat and they looked at an original piece of work that's not an adaptation and said, and hugely ambitious, and said, you know, this is a story that is worth telling, and it's very in a very modern way. I think that the notion of a television novel, you know, in the way that, you know, David Simon described Baltimore or whatever it would be in The Wire, is new and exciting, and I think that was the ambition that Paul and Simon brought to me, and what I responded to.
So, and then you, shooting it in a sense, there's certain tricks you're using there, almost from Bollywood, like the seeing people through screens and so forth. It's a, in a sense, unlike the 1980s dramas, it has both sensibilities. Is that something that you're aiming for when you're shooting?
I think I was. Well, I just first have to say that the scripts I read were just so really fantastic and just incredibly emotional. They were so emotional that I found myself completely wrapped up and just responding to the material. So when it came to trying to realise that on the screen, it became about how can we, all of us who were involved in making it, just try and capture some of that passion, the real life, the heart, the soul, the energy that comes from India, and this particular strange bit of India and that world, and the British in there, and all these. It was about how do we make that energy work, and so it was about trying to find, I guess for me, the most open-hearted, accessible, exciting style that I could, while still remaining true to kind of classical storytelling. Because I think it's a very classical piece of storytelling, you know, the way the stories play out, and I thought it was important to do that. So, I don't know, tricks, everything's a trick when you're shooting something. It's all a giant card trick. But I think what you're trying to go for in those tricks is you're trying to find the heart and the emotion of all of that. So I hope as a team we sort of try to go for that.
It wasn't actually in India, it was Malaysia, and I think you was that's actually only is it your second big international location shoot? I wonder what it was about this that made you travel all that distance.
I never get location. It's usually Manchester or Liverpool. The odd one. Yes, so of course that was very exciting to go there, of course it was. But it wasn't just that, obviously. The script was, I just loved the script. I found it completely fascinating. I had a very seductive letter from Charlie, which I won't go into. But, you know, and I just loved it. I felt that it wasn't, you know, romanticised. It wasn't nostalgic. It was kind of real. There was a real edgy, gritty feel to it, and I'd never seen that before, never seen this subject treated like that before, and I was surprised as well that the character I was asked to play was an East End girl, you know, I didn't know those people went out there in those, you know, the whole thing was completely new to me. So really, but Paul sent me a couple of books, Playing Tales of the Raj and Women of the Raj, and it was just fascinating, and I loved the character. It was wonderful going to Malaysia, because the food is fantastic. It was a brilliant whole experience.
And you were out there for a tidy run?
Yes. Serious chunk of time, yeah.
What was it like the shooting?
Well, it's very full-bodied. It's all-encompassing because essentially one of the many naive assumptions I made about when I entered the world of show business was that you could basically shoot it all in an afternoon, and I underestimated quite by some way how the depths and complexities of shooting 10.5 hours of drama, you know, and it's a rich tapestry-filled plot. You know, there's loads of characters and loads of drama that happens, and it was, you know, all of us were there on the other side of the world in this bubble, in a part of Malaysia, the island of Penang, which is a UNESCO heritage site. So it is in itself a time capsule. So we are replicating this time capsule, filming inside the time capsule, and when alongside these protected buildings our own sets which have sprung up seamlessly either side of these buildings, and you know, it's definitely enough to lose your marbles. Which I did. but helpfully, most of me losing my marbles is captured on screen.
Big question. Obviously, one of the attempts of the filmmaking is to portray both sides of empire, and you'll put the most visible place of that. How, I mean, had you seen it? The 80s, too young to see the 80s?
Well, I did see it at the time. I was probably an embryo then, but I actually chose not to when I found out about this, because I sort of didn't want to have it in my head too much. I've read a lot, and I did a literature degree at university, and we read a lot of what was then called post-colonial literature. But what was really exciting was the way that this drama, as you say, told both sides of the story, and as Julie pointed out, it doesn't. We're not looking at sort of, what I think is really clever about it is we're not looking at sort of idealised vision of the good old days. We're looking at people that may see it that way and perceive it that way, and there are lots of really clever touches already in this first episode. And I know that there are more to come, but of that slight detachment from that perspective, and of course to have fully fledged Indian characters and Anglo-Indian characters, and you know, fully fledged parts for men and women. I think it's an amazing tapestry, as that's the word you used, that Paul has weaved, and so yeah, it was. I think we were all spoiled to be part of it.
Jemima, your character sort of bringing relatively contemporary sexual politics into the area, with her kind of fleeing the husband but keeping telling lies about it. What's her role? Is she the modern woman in the almost like 1920s environment?
I don't know. I think she is a woman who listens to her instincts and desires, and whether or not she's ahead of time, probably when you put it in that context, I think it was definitely a bold move for women to do something like that at the time. But she will pay the consequences. It will be an adventure. Yeah.
And then actually your character is the closest to the, I mean, there's personal politics, but there's pure politics in what she's after, I guess. There's a certain, do you have any responsibility in playing that?
Huge. But I think I just tried to forget about those and just go with whatever Paul's written, because you can do as much research as you want to do, but at the end of the day you've got to play what's written on the page, and the relationships were so incredible, so I think that was the most important thing for me, and then everything else just came along with it, because the writing was just incredible.
So we've got about 10-15 minutes for questions. Do we have any questions from the floor? Start there.
Hi, I've got one for Julie. Having notched up an amazing 40-year career, is there any dream film or TV role that you'd still love to play apart from this one?
No, is there any favourite, is there any role?
A dream TV or film role?
Yes. No. No, it usually isn't about roles, it's usually about the script and the people. First of all, the script, and then who's going to be in it? Who's going to direct it? Are they attractive? Are they younger than me? Sorry?
Sorry, I saw you on TV last week giving out the NTA award to Downton Abbey. Is that a series that would tempt you, possibly?
Well, not now that I've got Indian summers. And they never asked me. I said I wouldn't go downstairs anyway.
Thank you.
Not a phone call.
We have one question there.
I interview all here from this Blitz magazine. First of all, congratulations, a really fantastic article I just saw. Question for Paul. Paul, in terms of trying to get both sides of the story, were you biased at all in any way, and how difficult was it to be able to do that?
Do you know what? I think I guess the point of entry was, as in any project, is you read, you watch, you listen, you know, and you try and absorb it. I tried. I think it's a common mistake, which I'm sure I have made many times, where you writing something that we become 2015 standing in judgment on, I guess, my grandparents' generation, and I tried as far as possible not to get into taking sides. I tried as far as possible to understand what it must have felt like under the skin to have been there, whether you were a Parsi family just getting by, or a young British man trying to live the life that you dreamt of since you were a child, you know. And so, yes, I think it's it's trying not to be schematic, it's trying not to take sides. I think, as far as possible, I try not to have a take, you know, because I think sometimes that's the enemy of drama. I think as far as possible, you know, love thine enemy. Try and find the complexity and the flaws and the goodness in everyone. You know, so that was my start.
You, sir.
Thank you. Can I ask the actors whether life mirrored art and whether you created your own little England out in Malaya? Did you have your own cricket team and your own roast dinners on a Sunday, that sort of thing?
I tried so hard. I managed to find a little bit of cricket with the Australian Air Force. Brought a lot of kit out there and didn't get to play as much as I'd hoped. So big disappointment on my part.
We had a sort of an English v Malays sort of welcome to Malaysia football match, which didn't go well because someone fractured a bone in their foot. So
it was the end of my career. But luckily, the director was in no way encouraging me to take part, and it's in no way an unbelievabably serious football.
But another thing as well, that so many of us, because it was such a long time filming in Penang, it felt like we were a company on a long engagement on tour.
Yes.
In that.
In what goes on tour stays.
Yeah. But that. You know, so there was a kind of strange, because of where we were all living and our proximity to each other out there. It kind of felt sometimes that we were on campus, and sometimes that was a good thing, and sometimes it kind of went insane because your only escape was Skype. But
yeah.
But we did have our Sunday roasts.
We did.
And
yeah.
Domino's pizzas.
Yes.
A lot of Domino's pizzas.
Yeah.
And a lot of booze.
Yes. Well then.
Up at the back there, yes. So.
This question's for Henry. Were you embarrassed doing the sex scene, and how many takes did you need before you got it right?
Well, if there's one thing, I don't know if you've heard about doing sex scenes on camera or for showbiz theatrical purposes. The myth is that they are very unsexy. The truth is that they're incredibly sexy. And sometimes people have, you know, things spiral out of control. People are so turned on. No, it's like choreographing a dance. Like choreographing a dance. So you just choreograph it, and you know, if you have the right support in the form of an incredibly emotionally articulate director.
The right support.
Yes, and the right support structurally. It's going on swimmingly. I have to say, though, for the record, as far as these things go, the more specific a writer is, the better it goes on screen. That is the truth.
If they leave too much to sort of...
That wasn't even a scene that was in the script. See, that's what I'm saying. That's how these things can spiral out of control.
We have another question.
So glad someone
so should we start there with the white top and then move? So the next question will be down here.
Question for Julie. Yes. You mentioned, Chris, at the beginning of this, that you were given a role as an East End girl and you didn't think East End girls went out there in this. Why is that?
Why is that? Why did I think that?
Yeah.
Because I was completely ignorant.
Ill-informed.
Completely ignorant. And because I suppose I vaguely remember Julie around because I was a baby. I didn't think it was about people like that. I didn't think those people went out there. No, I thought it was upper class people that went out and ruled India. So no, it's complete ignorance. That's why I thought it. Did you see? Let's keep writing that down.
I think part of sorry to jump in. I think part of that is what we've been exposed to in
Culturally.
Yeah, culturally. So you see a certain type of people, and you see drama happening within a certain strata, and anything outside of that.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of period dramas can be guilty of that, and I think that's what's so exciting about this is that you get a glimpse of it now, and it unfolds and goes further and goes deeper.
Yeah, also what you were saying about the, Paul, about all the people who are playing as dukes and duchesses, there's this great thing about the culture of people that went there to live a life that wasn't necessarily accessible to them domestically in England. And with that, that's such rich stuff to play with dramatically. Because you get all these people who, are they what they say they are, what they appear to be, or is that just the mask that they've decided to wear the minute they touch down on soil? And Nikesh and I we did a bit of research in the British Library, which has amazing kind of reservoir of all this, the real historical documents of the people in Simla, their diaries, their photographs, watercolours, all these amazing things. It's fantastic that you get these people who arrived as East End Barrow boys and left as kind of either, I'm talking India of course, as industrial tycoons. This one guy started like an airline, like all these guys they just busked it, got away with it, lived this amazing rich life, because that was what the purpose of this place was in their mindset.
And I think the more you understand that, the more you understand why it was so hard to let it go. Because these people, they come home and comparatively they're nothing.
Yeah, there's a rumour Godwin tells a story about when she was out in Bengal. I think her father worked for some sort of ship company, so it was middle class job. But they lived in an enormous house with many servants. And when they were finally due to move back to England, her little sister said, it was fine. When I meet the king, should I call him Your Majesty or just George? And I think because she assumed that those were the circles she would move in, and actually the shock of return was something.
It's also fascinating, isn't it, how many British were actually in India in 1932 compared to the entire population of India, and ruled an entire subcontinent, and somehow it had become this extraordinary symbiotic relationship of the rulers and the ruled, and for me that was one of the most amazingly interesting and fascinating things of exploring in your script, was that relationship between the English family and the Indian family, the rulers, the ruled, and the complications of that relationship. And I mean, it was like a drop in the ocean, the number of English people in India.
3,000 civil servants, 50,000 soldiers, 300 million Indians.
I mean, how did that work? Incredible. So for me, that was like absolutely, and that's what I think so cool about this show.
A question there. We actually got time for maybe just one or two more questions. So if we go to there, is there anyone else with a burning question? And then we'll do that. We'll keep it. So yes, if you start with you.
Sophie Chalk from the International Broadcasting Trust. It's a request really. We're very keen on international content which explains Britain's place in the world, and the last time Channel 4 did anything as ambitious as this was The Promise a few years ago, explaining the current situation in the Middle East through history, and it's fabulous to see this series. So Paul, could I just say, next time you go on holiday, could you choose somewhere equally as interesting and stay somewhere equally as interesting and ask someone to show you some of their archives, and hopefully that will inspire another Channel 4 series.
To go camping in Wales?
Sorry, it's not far enough afield. I mean, it's somewhere more diverse.
Okay. So if we go up to the top and then down to there. So who's there? And then there.
Just to follow on, Julie, from your point about people perhaps being slightly ignorant about the real history here, why do you feel that that this is an important story to tell? And why is now the right time to tell it and do this, perhaps a corrective? So what people know?
Why do I think this is an important story to tell?
And why now? Is it some kind of corrective to...
Well, I think it's sort of been forgotten this period somehow. It's sort of gone out of people's consciousness. And so it's good to bring it back. And what was the other thing you asked me? I am 65 and I'm very tired.
Yeah, so I suppose I was asking, why do you as a whole feel that this is the right time?
Well, I think when it's been portrayed before in the past, I think it hasn't been balanced. And now, I think, yes, it is corrective. Paul's put that right and put it in balance, because it is about the Indian population and it is about the Brits and how they dealt with the fall of the Raj, and I think it's very real. And I think... Yes, please, John.
I think it's no accident that the series is set in 1932, because if you wanted to set a series, you could set it for 40 years previously, where everything is absolutely rosy, absolutely, everyone's on top of the world, business as usual. The important thing about setting a series here and at this time is that the cracks are there, and everyone is trying to hang on for dear life, because...
And pretend that it's all fine.
Yeah, because they know the end is coming. That's why this angle it resonates, and that's why it's new.
And we continue to have an extraordinary relationship with India. I think it's this year or next year, for the first time, India is going to overtake Britain in terms of GDP. I think we've got nearly. I think the Indian population is our largest minority population. We've got 2 million Indians living amongst us. It's extraordinary history to tell. I think that as we move forward, if we're successful over the cycle and we reach partition, I think partition and the creation of Pakistan was probably, when we look back, will be one of the sort of great defining things that happened to the world in the last 100 years. It's affected, actually does affect our everyday lives and our everyday sort of global politics. So I think, the world has changed an awful lot, it's become a bit of secret history, actually, that I think directly affects our contemporary lives, and I think that's why, that's why I felt sort of passionate, actually, about this story and getting to grips with this story.
So we're going to have to wrap it up after this. I know other people had questions, but we haven't got time. We've got to go. Bear with me a second. To the Arts Club, where I'm sure you can ask all these questions in an important one-on-one basis and get the exclusive, rather than ask to get in front of a bunch of other journalists. So when this is finished, we've asked that question. We thank the panel. What we'll do is you'll follow people with umbrellas from here to the Arts Club. Is that right? You'll see the umbrellas. Parasol. Parasol. That's where the drink is. So yes, sir, if you'd ask your question, and you can ask your questions later.
It's a question to Judy. During your career, which of your co-stars have inspired you the most?
Ask a real question.
Yeah, there we go. Yes.
When she snipped my fingers.
So, okay, so we've got no, we haven't got time for one more. You are going to have to go to the Arts Club. In the meantime, let me tell you that the TX date has been finalised and thrust into my hands before walking on stage. It's the 15th of February at 9 PM, and you can't get much more romantic than that, apart from 40.